So you guys wanted a video about analog horror like a decent while ago, and I kind of forgot about it, put it on the back burner. So I've had the script laying around for a bit, so thought maybe I'd finish it and give it a bit of polish and actually talk about it, because now it's something I feel like I have a deeper understanding of because I looked into this for a while. So yeah, today I'll be talking about, analog horror and the hot rise and fall, the highs and lows, and overall everything kind of just interesting about it. Everything horror related, and this video might cover maybe some dark topics, especially regarding with the painter, which is gonna be a fun part. Ooh, I had a lot of fun writing about that. And a few other series do cover some darker topics, so yeah, just keep that in mind. But I just hope you guys enjoy this one, and let's talk. Alright, so I guess I might as well define analog horror really quick. So what is analog horror? Well, it's a very interesting and kind of a lot harder to explain than you'd actually think, so let's define it together. What does all analog horror series on YouTube have in common? Well, the most iconic part of it all is the sense of age of the VHS era. The VHSs were cheap, at least after they got more into the mass production cycle of things. They were cheap and easy to produce. Technology got better, they became very common, and it has this very inexplicable sense of VHS to them. I mean, it's something you can only really feel when you watch the old footage. Grainy screens, scan line, blurry feel, awful audio quality. You get the idea. It's old. It's got that feeling of old to it. To many young viewers, it has this feeling of mystery, because they never lived through the time that VHS was common. And to many older viewers, if anyone is older when watching this, it has more of the sense of nostalgia and uncovering the past. And the reason this is done to push this sense of like a lost past almost, like you're some kind of investigator uncovering something that was hidden many years ago. So that's definitely a part of it, the old VHS feel to it. What else is there? Mixed media. Mixed media is definitely what I would consider a core part of analog horror. Many series use like this variety of different mediums to kind of like tell the story while still using the VHS style. In a single video, they'll include like an informational video, an educational video, a news clips, police tapes, text, images, slideshows, found footage, and so on, all with this kind of, again, VHS and dated feel to them. And sometimes they use one central form of media, like a news clip or something, or like some kind of informational video, and then sprinkle different snippets of things throughout the video. They'll have like one core focused medium. So yeah, and why do they do this? Because it, again, further gives that feeling of an investigator uncovering things, giving a sense of the past, and also it can establish the world and time period better, and it also kind of gives a look into like, it's a normal place. You're not watching these strange tapes, you're watching normal things that were commonplace back then. It's hard to explain. When you watch an analog horror and they show like an informational documentary, you get a feel for the world, and you get a feel for how things were kind of normal there. And then, it'll show like corruption, and you can see how it's bad. And speaking of corruption, that's also another thing that I tend to notice a lot in these analog horrors. What you're watching kind of has this sense, like whenever these tapes get corrupted, you get this sense of horror that you can't really comprehend. And it's a lot harder with regards to that, but that tends to be very common. You just see the corruption in a lot of these. Again, that's not necessarily a key part of all of them, but the ones that give this sense of horror from cosmic horror tend to do that. And speaking of horror, that's another key part of analog horror, I guess. It's not the same as traditional horror. It's hard to explain, but they tend to be more supernatural and cosmic in this very inexplicable way. They have these senses of like dystopia sometimes, or like an alternate timeline. And it's, again, very hard to explain. Some will follow like a virus getting out of hand, and it's more the sci-fi horror, but with this very interesting twist and way of telling the story, and it has this slow burn feel to it. By many standards, this kind of horror is definitely considered experimental, and it's pretty obvious why. It looks so visually unique, and even if the stories sometimes can be similar to mainstream horror, the way that it presents itself in such a unique way would definitely consider it to be, experimental. At least until it got popular, and we'll get into that soon. So, where does analog horror really start? Well, if I follow like the main analog horrors, I wouldn't consider like something like, friggin' Blair Witch, that's more found footage, but I would probably maybe focus on Local 58. Local 58 was a series that was far less popular than something like Mandela Catalogue, and kind of set the general ideas. It was very underground at the time it was released. It was like 6 years ago. It was like 2018. But it would set like, general ideas, stylistic choices that would be used by analog horrors after it. Use of multimedia, feels for like the old TV and all that, cosmic horror, a deep and very unraveling kind of mystery, corrupted tapes. You get the idea. In fact, for a long time, it's really interesting because this would kind of go unnoticed until, 2 years after its release or something like that. I remember MatPat covered a video on it, but it was much later on. And I consider this an important anchor for the genre, as it's definitely something that, you know, should be mentioned. Again, it's kind of what set the basis for a lot of things. And later down the line, someone would make something called the FNAF VHS tapes, Squimpus McGrimpus, and it would be more of a analog horror that was based on the FNAF universe. But rather than telling the story of FNAF, it had its own unique spin and take on the series, while also deepening the characters and adding a lot to it. I think it's masterfully made and was effective at depicting a more nuanced and more, I guess real take on the series that, you know, this FNAF is known for having kind of these more 2D flat characters, you know, William Afton bad, Michael Afton good, things like that. And this was a more nuanced and more deep take, you know, it talked more about the humanity of everything and stuff like that. I think it was absolutely great. You know, and now this is about the time that this came out, I would say, is when things really started to pick up some steam, and more things would get popular, more analog horrors would come out. Like, I consider the Monster Mythos, which isn't really an analog horror, it's more like an alternate history thriller, but it deserves to be here because I absolutely love it. I consider that to be something that should be mentioned here. I think that's absolutely phenomenal. The story it tells in such a unique way is something that is so cool to me. Creator's amazing, and it's still something I think you should absolutely check that out. I might even make a video on it. You know, Walten Files actually would come out around this time as well, and that's definitely, this is around the time that things begin to pick up steam. But honestly, I think it's really when it really reached its peak was the starting of the Mandela Catalogue, and that definitely is like the point of peak, I guess, if you want to put it. So the Mandela Catalogue is what I would consider like the start of like the Gilded Age, if you were to talk in historical terms, the age of like glory that everyone looks back on. It was one of the most popular analog horrors and would like get super big on the internet. And why did it get popular? I honestly don't know. If you ask me, it's like all the other ones. You have a mysterious cosmic horror, but this one had more of a religious, I guess, implication or twist, you know, multimedia, etc., corrupted tapes. But this one just popped off, and the analog horror genre became mainstream from here on. Why? Because suddenly everyone was talking about it, and it was no longer just this experimental form of horror, but now it's analog horror. It's something that is mainstream. Now everyone was making analog horror, and, you know, they thought it would, like, fit into things and kind of fit into the space of analog horror. I don't really know how to say it, but other series got very popular, and during this time a lot of things were coming out, and it's very hard to track many of the releases. You know, a lot of series were continuing and things like that, and, you know, you got the Mandela Catalogue obviously continuing, Walten Files was still going on, Monster Mythos still pretty underground but also going on, and things like Gemini Home Entertainment would also come out. Again, it's not like things changed that much, but you really get the idea. Like, the core ideas of analog horror were still there, but things just got a lot more popular. This was also boosted as well by people who were hyping up the backrooms, and it also got its own VHS adaptation. And it's interesting because I actually remember many years ago, before it got really popular, I watched like a video on it, and it had this like background of like urban exploration. It was super old, and I remember watching this and thinking, oh, that's pretty cool, this is really interesting. And I remember it getting popular, and I'm just had this weird sense of deja vu. I'm like, I've seen this before, like, but if not deja vu, but like I just remember it felt so weird to see it come up again. But yeah, the backrooms, you know, something that would definitely boost a lot of the analog horror stuff. And in general, this was the wave of retro. A lot of the old stuff came out, you know, PSX games were, not PSX games were getting released, but the games kind of followed that style. Like, there were games that follow that style. You have a lot of just old media coming out in general around this time. And that's another topic for another video, but you get the idea. Overall, this period is just where everything really did reach its peak, but it did not come without its downsides. There were definitely some downsides. You see, analog horror kind of reminds me a lot of creepypastas, FNAF, and friggin' FNF. You have the few great things in the center, but then you look outside the center and you have twice as much uninspired slop. People were basically making analog horror of almost anything they could think of that was out there. Mario, Sonic, Family Guy, SpongeBob, you get the idea. They were all kind of the same, and they followed the trope of what if character evil and bad thing happened and very sad, which, that sounds really familiar. It sounds like a creepypasta almost. Anyways, you know, if you want to get really offensive, I guess, you can just, for whatever reason, someone just made an analog horror where they insulted essentially the creator of SpongeBob. That was an interesting take on analog horror. Again, many of these use pre-existing media, and they're like a dime a dozen, and most of these were kind of just like, they felt like, you know, when you'd go online and you'd read a shitty creepypasta and rarely felt creative, because they just really did feel like repackaged versions of the same corruption trope. The pre-existing media go bad, you know, pre-existing media go bad, no good character go crazy. That was just everywhere at the time. I mean, not all of them used that kind of feel. Not all of them did that, but a lot of them did, you know, but there were certain ones that were still good. The Godzilla one was pretty interesting, and you get the general idea. But during the highest points of analog horror, it should just be mentioned, and it should be recognized that this basically was like the freaking floodgates opening. It was like, fetch me their souls, you know what I'm saying? Alright, so basically from about that point to now, we're in the fallout, which is basically just the present. Analog horror has slowly died down, but still has a pretty active community. Things have gotten significantly better and even more creative, and there are more well thought out ideas that have slowly been taking shape during this fallout period. For example, the Lockridge series, or Lockridge, wait, was it Lockbridge? I literally am reading a book about Puritans called Lockridge right now, and I forgot okay. Friggin' American Studies has actually infected me. I meant Greylock. I'm so sorry, but I'm keeping this in because that was funny as hell. Anyways, it was a well-made series and is a well-made series that focused on this government conspiracy, ancient cosmic horror, and a tad bit of sci-fi and this mystical supernatural element. And it's actually really impressive, very strong visually with regards to its story, and very strong story-wise in general as well. It's just absolutely something that is worth checking out. You have Chezzkids Archive, another really interesting one that has this old internet ghost feel to it. It was an analog in the sense that it's like a VHS, but it's analog in the sense that it's old. I don't know how to put it, but I think that one's absolutely phenomenal. I remember there's a video by someone called like Minksha or something like that made a video on it. Absolutely something worth checking out. You know, Midwest Angelica, obviously that's another really cool one too. Wendigoon made a video on that. Walten Files got really good and a lot more cinematic. You have the third and fourth part were absolutely phenomenal from people who watched it. Mandela Catalogue got really good as well. Alex Keiser got in some drama, but I think things got sorted out. I tried actually contacting him to kind of see where he got inspiration from for his series, but it didn't work out. He never responded, but that's fine. I'm like some friggin' no-name creator anyways, so whatever. And so, you know, as the in general, just popularity was dying down, the quality greatly increased, and a lot of creators honed in on their storytelling abilities. You know, FNAF VHS and FNAF inspired stuff was going around still, you know, becoming higher quality in their animations and stuff, and, you know, they were all taking their own unique spins, and in general, you just get the idea. However, this wouldn't be an analog horror video without mentioning one of the absolute pinnacles of absurdist comedy, and something that also made people question what analog horror really is, but most importantly, it was an absolutely hilarious thing. So you might be wondering, where does freaking absurdist comedy fit into analog horror? 2 words: The Painter. One of the most absurdly hilarious things I have ever watched in the analog horror space, and the comedy goes outside of the media itself. This is so funny because if you don't know what The Painter is, it's basically the slideshow presentation where you basically just watch, quote, police tapes of them describing the most absurdly gory and violent crime scenes, and then there's like a painting that they leave behind, like the killers leave behind as well, and he paints his victims in this weird artistic representative way. And the ways these crimes happen, the ways these murders happen, is so absurd and unrealistically it's so violent. It's like, dude, it's so violent that it's over the top, and it's like really funny. It's, you know, it's so absurd it's not even funny, but it is funny. Not to mention how hilarious it even is to have such an incompetent police force. Let's just focus on the crimes and murders themselves. These murders are basically if you had 2 edgy emo teenagers who watch like gore a lot, and they just basically competed over who can make the most like insanely over the top crime scene, and then they like merged their ideas together like freaking Dragon Ball Z fuse them. For example, there's this one where the killers go into this house, take this pregnant woman, and take the fetus out, like this is that one French movie, right? And then they basically, I mean, she's probably already dying and in shock. She's gonna die in like 3 minutes, dude. You already like opened up her stomach, basically. That's already gonna kill her, like blood loss. But then they strangle her with the umbilical cord for like no reason. That's so comically out of pocket. And then they go to the husband, shove the fetus down his throat, and then make him choke on it, which is absurd because like a fetus isn't like, it's pretty big, like it's not that small. But I guess these killers, and again, no, this is something that people unironically found scary, that this series was unironically scary. I remember laughing when I first saw this because this is so insane. I'll get into it more later, but you know, these killers must have really liked Billy Mays like commercials, you know what I'm saying? Because wait, there's more. For whatever reason, the killers were just like, I hate this baby. It's already dead, but I just hate this baby. And then they take the baby and I guess just like scatter it around the house for like no reason. I guess they just got bored or something like that. It's so goofy. And then another really good one is where the killers somehow managed to bring this giant pile of wax onto this guy who they just mutilated and is probably already in shock. And then they cut off his arms and his eyelids for whatever reason. And it's like, they put a giant pile of wax and suffocate him with that. It's like, how the hell did you get a giant pile of molten wax into some dude's apartment? Did you get like a freaking airdrop, or like did you put it in your ender chest? Like what? And they added in some like random third arm into the wax for like no reason. I don't know, maybe one of them like left it in their pocket and just tossed it in for fun. All of these crimes are so out of pocket, it's actually really funny. Now, earlier I mentioned an incompetent police force, right? Well, the thing is, for whatever reason, these are the dumbest, like, I don't know if this is propaganda against the police force, but it makes them look so bad. For example, they only figured out that maybe there could be 2 killers by the second to last episode that came out of like a 9 or 10. And it's like, you could have figured that out so much earlier. Like, they found like this body that got stabbed 250 times and found like traces of semen in 2 of them. So it's like, why didn't you just test it? That gives you something to work off of. And there's so much other stuff they miss. They never bothered with fingerprints, signs of struggles around the house, like seeing if anyone broke in, splatter patterns, like to see what weapons they use, hair, just finding hair in the crime scene because there ain't no way they're both bald, cloth, seeing if they wore like specific types of clothes, profiling maybe like seeing who they target commonly and things like that. And they never even bothered to like just see where the crimes were happening and get like the general location of the killer and killers, I should say. And really, like, these are things that they actually do. And you know, oh, another thing that they didn't even bother doing, looking into the victims. They never even bothered to see if there was any connection between the victims or some kind of past that they had or something like that. And again, they never even tested semen samples, which gives you like concrete DNA evidence, because they just didn't. And hell, like, the most basic thing you're supposed to do as a detective is just like talk to people around, see if you heard anything, see if you saw anything suspicious. Hell, they're buying paint, they're painters, right? They didn't even check to see if anyone bought paint recently. Like, who was on the case, bro? Paul Blart? Did CSI use ChatGPT in college, bro? Like, the only redeeming qualities of the series is the art, which low-key kind of looks goofy sometimes, but you know, I'm not gonna judge on that. Art is difficult. And the voice acting actually in like one episode was like really good. I actually think that was like a super cool, like, standout part, the voice acting. But that's about it. The creator of this all, Urban Spook, got so much backlash on social media because of how absolutely shit this was, and also included a very disrespectful edition of a child like getting sexually assaulted in this for whatever reason. I think that was so like that's like really out of pocket now. You're getting really, that's not even funny anymore, man. I was like, come on, man. And you know, I don't know why he added this, but you know, people were yelling at him saying, hey, I don't think your series is good. You know, people like Postura, large creators, were saying, hey, your series is awful. I don't think you should be selling. And not to mention, the child, like, there was a painting, obviously, of like this kid who's getting, it's not like you don't see the kid getting, you can see it on screen. He sold the reference to like sexual assault on a shirt, and I'm like, why would you do that? Anyways, yeah, so people just criticized him like crazy on Twitter. And instead of ignoring it or taking responsibility, he just had this absolute crash out and just started incoherently screaming at everyone in a blind rage. And he definitely wasn't trolling. It didn't matter if you were a respected YouTuber or something, you were going to be part of this like insane crash out, and it was super funny. He became the butt of the joke by everyone. Even the Walten Files like creator and friggin' Chezzkids made fun of him, and he kept calling everyone like the same thing, like quote autistic furries, which is kind of funny because then I remember reading like friggin' everyone's like, dude, that's like your main audience. So, yeah, anyways, I really don't know what happened, but he would just randomly disappear or something, probably because, I don't know, it was pretty bad. And his fandom is also awful. They're so edgy and stuff, but whatever. You know, there's many videos to really describe what is actually wrong with the painter and Urban Spook, and I low-key almost made a video about it, but I feel like ranting about it like this in this goofy way is a lot funner. So, yeah. Something I completely forgot to mention is, right, so Urban Spook is crashing out. I totally forgot about this. I don't know why I didn't add this, but I'm just gonna go off the cuff here. Urban Spook is crashing out on Twitter, right? Freaking out and stuff. People hate him. And then, like, Wendigoon goes and makes a video about what he thinks is the best and the worst analog horror. He compared Greylock and he compared Urban Spook's the painter together. And so, like, Wendigoon basically says that Urban Spook's The Painter sucks, essentially. Like, compared to most analog horrors, it's not good. He very literally called it the worst in the title. And Urban Spook, instead of crashing out, because apparently Urban Spook is a Wendigoon fan, he just was like, oh man, blah blah blah, oh, he like gave like this complete, bro completely switched sides. He went from red to blue like it's TF2. That was a crazy rhyme. Like, he just completely switched sides and just stopped crashing out once one of the people he looked up to like criticized it, instead of calling I don't know, Wendigoon and also an autistic furry like he did with everyone else. It's just so funny how like double-sided this guy was and how absurdly fragile his ego was, and just watching his absolute crash out. All in all, analog horror might be like less popular, but honestly it's getting pretty good. There are many amazing series still going on, and I'd highly recommend checking different ones out. You know, I love Monument Mythos, and I might even make a video on it because it's something that is definitely worth checking out. But then again, Wendigoon already made one. But hey, if you guys don't want to see that, maybe I'll do it. And you know, Greylock, not Lockridge, god damn it. You know, that one's a really good one. You know, there's all these series that are still going on. The Walten Files might get a 5th part. You know, just check all these series out. I think you guys should see them. I mean, even if you already have, you know, just show your support and stuff. These are people who are doing it for fun. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time.